My name is Victor Reed. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, a little outside of Philadelphia, right next to a military base, actually. I think when I was growing up, I always thought that I would end up as a lawyer. That didn't really happen. I come from a pretty small family. There were only three of us that have managed to go on to college. I'm one of them, myself, my sister, and my aunt. And that's actually one of the reasons why I ended up getting involved as a student assistant later on at the University of Hawaii at Hilo with the Upward Bound program, which I know we'll talk about shortly. But yeah, that's a brief bio and background on me. I was a student assistant to the academic coordinators, or one academic coordinator in particular, for the Upward Bound program. That is a program that focuses on helping first generation college students with academic readiness and preparation in advance. I think I kind of mentioned this briefly. One of the reasons why I wanted to be involved in that is my own personal background. I also came to the University of Hawaii as a transfer student. And previously, I had worked in a similar program called the Educational Opportunity Program. In fact, I am an Educational Opportunity Program student recipient. That program was focused on helping students from economically disadvantaged areas access higher education as well. So there's a lot of synergy there. In terms of the things that I learned, I think a big personal focus for me has always been giving back to the community. Working with the Educational Opportunity Program in New Jersey and Upward Bound in Hilo, Hawaii, I think is just very on target with what's personally important to me as far as relating what I've been through and the challenges that are involved when you don't necessarily have people around you that you can model yourself after in terms of pursuing higher education and sharing that type of background and that type of experience with people who are in similar situations. I'm a senior partner development executive at Skykick. It is a cloud automation and cloud management tech firm that is based in Seattle. In my role, I work with IT companies who partner with us to build, develop, and execute go-to-market strategies that will allow them to bring our platform to their customers. I think in terms of how I made the transition, I kind of came into the situation a little bit different to begin with. I transferred to the University of Hawaii when I was older, 26 or so, and I'd already spent time working in business development, working in sales, working in operations. So the foundation was already there. I don't think that for me personally, the reason why I studied political science really had anything to do with what I thought I would do as a profession afterwards. There are lots of people that I went to school with that do work in government. One, I think, is actually an elected official in the Puna district. But for me, my interest in political science really was personal. It had a lot more to do with political theory and understanding why we need government to begin with than actually aspirational in terms of a career field. So I'm kind of doing what I've always done, just in a different space in technology now.
I can actually sort of relate to the notion of going for other reasons than being a professional in that specific field, because I'm a marine science major and I don't see myself really being a professional within that field. It's more for myself to be knowledgeable in with the sort of policies that I would want to support and actually get into place for any oceanic support efforts that I want to be a part of. Yeah, so I can sort of relate to that 100%.
I also think, you really never know how you'll leverage and utilize what you're majoring right now into the future. So, I spent time living overseas in China. I spent time in Seattle, of course. I'm now in Washington, D.C. If I wanted to, as an example, pivot and focus on tech in the Fed space, certainly having a bachelor's degree in political science is going to be helpful for that, Yeah, so I think within the islands, UHH always has had a bit of a reputation as being more of the teaching focused campus, the one that was focused more on pedagogy rather than research based, like you see with Manoa. So that was an important thing for me, being able to have smaller class sizes, really develop hands-on relationships, not only with my peers and students at the time, but also my professors was very important. I also think for me, as I mentioned before, I transferred a little bit later on in life. I wanted to have a different type of experience when I transferred than I had originally. I went to a large school in the Northeast, and that is a completely diametrically opposite type of experience to going to school, in Hilo, where it's quieter, I think you can't beat the scenery, and you also have a lot of time to focus on your actual studies. There is no hustle and bustle. So for all those reasons, I thought that UHH would be good. And I basically went from, going to a very large Catholic university to doing my reading on Black Sand Beach before class. And it was a decision I definitely don't regret. I think I kind of spoke on that piece just a moment ago. I think the location in and of itself, say, forces you to focus a lot more on your studies. There's not much to be distracted by outside of the actual nature itself. So if you come to the Big Island because you want to study at the University of Hawaii at Hilo, then you're going to have all the time and the space to be able to actually focus on your studies without being distracted. The other thing I would say is, my professors in the College of Arts and Sciences, they were all very worldly people. As a matter of fact, I mentioned that I'd gone on to live in China. I lived in China for 3 years. I had a professor at the time, his name was Professor Mbao Wang. He was from Shanghai, and I took his class in US Sino Relations and learned an awful lot about Chinese culture, political attitudes, his own personal experiences having grown up there. That actually fueled my desire to want to go live in China myself, maybe 3 years after that. But that hands-on approach to being able to work with your professors and get to know them, I'm not really interacting with TAs or anything like you would at a very large institution, I think really opens you up to the possibilities that you can look at shaping your direction based on the direct back and forth that you're able to have with people around you, rather than being, I think, maybe a number, which is sometimes the case at larger schools, right? That whole trip to China, that whole life experience doesn't happen if I'm one of 500 students in a classroom. I think there's just maybe the best way to sum it up is, if you go to the University of Hawaii at Hilo, there's very much a community feeling there, and you're actively a part of that community. I think that does wonders for growth, development, and opens up potential paths in life that might not otherwise exist if you're just, as we said, one of many. Yeah, this is a good question. So I would say, in the tech space, depending on what firm you're working at, it's extremely diverse. You're working with people from many different walks of lives, nationalities, people who come from different countries. Hilo and the islands in general, it's a veritable melting pot. There are so many different types of people around, and being able to have that exposure, learn how to communicate effectively across multiple different cultures, those things I think directly contribute to how I'm able to operate in some of these environments now, because that type of multicultural communication is certainly required. So the first thing I would say is, if you want to work in technology, you have to have some level of aptitude or disposition towards understanding technological concepts. In my role, you really also have to have business acumen as well. So what you're really doing is you're melding together the two, having business acumen with being able to understand technical concepts and putting them together in a way that makes sense for various different stakeholders. So I would say, if you wanted to work in the tech industry, those are your two options. Either you're highly technical or you're on the business side, but the business side requires you to be technical as well. Other than that, willingness to learn, and also thinking. Critical thinking is extremely important. You can teach an individual an awful lot about the minutia of technology and cloud and automation and things of that nature, if they have the ability to learn. But the critical thinking part is the problem solving part. And that's what gives you value from day one, right? If you can come into a role and start to analyze, assess, and solve problems, then you're bringing value, and the rest can be taught.
I think that's what I like about the ability here at UH Hilo to really get in touch with your professors so that they can teach you how to critically think, because I see a lot of people outside of academic settings, when they're presented with real problems, it's a bit of a struggle for them to be able to solve anything outside of a set formula.
Yeah.
Having to think outside of, any set format. I like how, over here, they really get you prepped for that.
Let's see. So the first thing I would say is, I just kind of touched on it a moment ago. The primary purpose, in my opinion, of being in college/university is to learn how to think. So focus on developing your critical thinking skills. That will go a long way. As it relates to actual coursework and studies and what you want to major in, it is true that a lot of people don't end up doing what they majored in. But whenever possible, I'm of the opinion that we should be pretty strategic about what it is that we want to study, with an eye towards how you're going to commoditize that after you graduate. Because, if we were to go back in time 20, 30 years ago, it used to be that just simply possessing a bachelor's degree was the litmus test to get past the gatekeepers into landing a professional role, and you could cross-train. You see that happening a lot less now. It's not to say that that's impossible, but it happens a lot less now. So being purposeful about what you want to study and what that's going to look like once you actually enter the market, I think will go a long way towards making sure that you'll end up upside down on the value of your degree, right? We have an old saying, you could study underwater basket weaving if you want to, but then you can't be upset about the types of jobs you might get with that. The other thing I would say is, in general, when you think about what it is you want to do or what you want to be, those thoughts that are in the back of your head where you're thinking, nah, that's crazy, I could never see myself doing that, or I don't know anybody who's done something like that, lean into them, because you never know where they're going to take you. Nobody plans for everything, and sometimes you have to plan to have no plan at all. And just understanding that you should be open as possible to what's out there, and kind of be willing to take those risks and go places where you might not have thought that you would be, usually ends up paying dividends down the road.
Do you have any recommendations for some of the younger graduates going into those more professional fields that require vast amounts of professional experience? Because some of the jokes that are, memes that go around is like, employers are wanting 10 years of experience with, a fresh out of college degree. Yeah. So how would you prep students to, really go into that sort of work environment?
Yeah, so I think I have a couple of thoughts on this. On a macro level, that type of thing that you were talking about, where we have these unreasonable expectations on what's required out of junior candidates, will eventually correct itself. That's the market being the market the way that it is right now. And I think you've seen some of that happening over the last year or so within the pandemic, where you see a shift in the power dynamic between employers and employees, and now working from home is kind of the new normal and things of that nature. I think you'll see less of that moving forward, although there will always be some element of that, because that's just kind of the nature of the beast when you're an employee and there are many different companies, and they set the parameters for what they are looking for. To that end, the piece around practical internships is a great way to gain experience. Some fields have that built into the path. Like, for example, in political science, a lot of folks did do internships at the county level. Some did internships at the state level. On the business side, I believe they have internships that are available there, a little bit more difficult, I think. But the point is that however you can attain experience, whether that be through a very formal process like an internship process at a university, or if your thing is you, for example, want to become an engineer, well, then start working on coding projects now. Go do Code Dojo, go create something, even if it's a MVP, a minimum viable product that you have that you can show, hey, this is what I've done, this is what I've worked on, I'm actually building a portfolio. All those things will help give you a leg up, I think, in terms of being more competitive in the marketplace.
It's really good to hear from older folk, that, it's not a requirement to stick to the field of your major.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are a bit too focused on emphasizing, I gotta be straight on this major. Every field that I look at, it's got to be related to this major specifically. Yeah.
I think, Kavika, when it comes to that piece, that's what graduate school and business school and law school are for. That's a firm commitment at that point, right? That's the profession that you're going to enter. But undergraduate education is all about, in my humble opinion, again, the foundational building blocks of what you will take and bring into the marketplace. And that's not necessarily going to be a one-to-one relationship with what you're actually studying, right? So